Welcome to this episode of A Facilitator's Journey. Today I am joined by Carla Miller, a women's leadership coach, thought leader, keynote speaker, trainer, anything to do with women's leadership. That is Carla's bag. We have a really great conversation about our businesses, why she started what she did, solo parenting, and also what is the difference between running a business that is B2C and B2B. So this is your invitation to get a cup of tea, take a perch on the pink seat, and tune in your ears. Enjoy this episode. Hey, Carla.
Hi, Kirsty.
Welcome. Welcome to A Facilitator's Journey. It's really lovely to have you join us today on the pink chair. A question I ask everybody at the very, very beginning of our conversations are, how do we know one another? How do we meet?
So I was vaguely aware of you from the LinkedIn universe, where I spend far too much time. And then Rob Gerety, someone I trust very much, is always very generous about making connections. And I was looking to scale my business using associates. And he said, talk to Kirsty, which I did. And you generously shared your experience and put me in touch with someone great to help me as well. So yeah, we've never met in person, but now I consider you a wise mentor in my world.
Wow. Rob Gerety has a lot to answer for. He's been a guest. He was podcast number 3, I think. But he has also introduced me to many people, and a lot of people often go, oh, Rob introduced us. I'm like, yes, he has. I'll take that back to him. For the listeners, can you describe what do you do? How do you share that with others?
Sure. So I am primarily a women's leadership coach, but I also work in-house with organizations on leadership, confidence, and influence. Been doing that for about 15 years now. My background being charity sector as a fundraising director. And I also host a podcast called Influence and Impact for Female Leaders. And I'm much more comfortable hosting the podcast than being on the guest side of things.
Before we started, Carla was like, oh, I don't know how I feel about this. It's really different, isn't it, when you're the guest versus like know what's coming up in your head.
Especially, and I'm a guest talking about myself. So normally when I'm a guest on podcasts, it's all about the clients and their issues and needs and women's struggles in the workplace, whilst I'm talking about me. I'm like, ooh, that's indulgent and fun.
And also you're talking about your business and how, and by sharing your stories as well, we know that it's super helpful for others who are going to be listening, because we're going to cover some interesting topics today, which I'm really looking forward to diving into. I think people are often very curious to know, how do we make the decision to leave an organization and set up on our own? What happened for you? What led you here?
For me, it was, I think, probably burnout to start with. So I had a very full-on career quite young. So I was a director at 29, a lot of responsibility, raising funds for charities. If the money didn't come in, you were ending services, stopping supporting terminally ill children, as well as making people redundant. And fundraising is not a predictable kind of work. It's amazing. It's a huge privilege and it's super interesting, but how hard you work doesn't equate to how much money you raise, almost. So always. So it was quite stressful. And I reached a point where I had overinvested emotionally in my work. And I just had nothing else to give. I was like, I want no more responsibility. So I left the job, sold the house, sold the car, just spent a few years doing interesting things. But as one of the interesting things I did, I retrained as a coach. So I'd had coaching, and I had always been one of those people that had like a 5-year life plan. I love to talk to people about, what do you want to do with your life? And I was like, this is a job. You get paid to do this. So I retrained then, and then spent a lot of years balancing coaching with interim roles in the charity sector. So kept my hand in fundraising, kept leading teams. And I think took a lot of learnings from my own experiences and took them to some extent into coaching. But when I had my child and I could no longer do interim work, it just didn't practically work for me anymore with childcare. I thought, well, how can I take those experiences I've had and turn them into something useful? And that's when I got into online training and running groups and bringing people together, and discovered I loved it. And how amazing it was to bring people together who'd had these experiences separately, felt so alone, felt like there was something wrong with them, that they needed fixing. And even just by spending a little bit of time together, even virtually, they felt less alone. They knew there was nothing wrong with them. They knew their challenges could be overcome. And I was like, this is amazing. So that's how I spend my days now, doing that with groups that I gather as open programs, but also in-house with organizations.
Amazing. And how long have you been doing this?
So I've been coaching for 15 years. I'll be totally honest and say it was a good 10 years before I made enough money to live off coaching. I think there's a little bit of a myth in terms of coaching, because the hourly rate can be fantastic, especially when you're experienced, but actually you're signing people up for a short number of sessions. When I first started, coaching was not a popular thing, like in the charity sector, particularly. It just didn't exist. There was no budget you could use from that. That's changing a bit now. But also I hadn't come from the corporate world, so I wasn't very well connected to people who had big budgets. So I think I was quite scrappy in how I built my business, and it took a long time. And I'd say it's really only the last 3 or 4 years that it has reached the level where it's now paying me what I got paid in my previous role. So it's been a bit of a labor of love.
I think it doesn't get spoken about enough, like what the costs, the finances, how it takes time to get to a level where your income is either matched or you are more self-sufficient. And it's because people go, oh my God, you're charging, let's take a figure, £400 an hour for coaching. You're like, and there's an hour up front for a chemistry call, potentially, or 2 half-hour calls. There's a proposal that's been written. There is all the downtime that doesn't happen in between the coaching. And therefore, whilst you might look at a contract with just in this instance, a corporation or a business and go, yeah, we've charged £4,000 for a series of coaching. That will have taken a while to get to. You might not get paid for another 3 or 6 months. So at the end of the day, you've got to factor all of that in, haven't you?
Yeah. I mean, the marketing time, for me, that is how I spend the majority of my time. Marketing, some sales, but mainly the marketing to try and get the phone calls, to get the sales. So if I could just deliver all day long, that would make me very, very happy. But I spend way more time building the business and marketing than I do delivering.
What kind of marketing do you give time to, Carla?
So for me, LinkedIn is the main place that I hang out. So I'm on LinkedIn daily. I've got about 15,000 followers now. And that's just about having a presence there. The podcast, so currently we're on fortnightly episodes of the podcast. So it's planning those. As you know, there's a lot of work goes into a podcast. I absolutely love it. You have such interesting conversations, but a lot of work goes into that. And then all the collateral that comes afterwards to make the most of it. A bit of Instagram as well, a weekly newsletter, LinkedIn newsletter sometimes. There's a lot of marketing going on. Lead magnets, all sorts of different things.
I think we'll get to lead magnets because that always blows my head up. All of the other things, though, for me, it's about consistency. I've learned that that's the ingredient that's really helped me. So you and I think, have a very similar footprint, just how you've just described all the things that you do. I know we do. I have about 16,000 followers on LinkedIn as well. I'm a bit more inconsistent in showing up daily as me. And when I do, it's great, but I just find it exhausting having to do all the replies and all the chatting, because I know that it works, but the newsletter piece, so having a newsletter on LinkedIn as well as our own list and being consistent. So for us, that's, I was in awe. You just went, oh, I do it weekly. I was like, oh, wow. I struggle. I do it monthly now.
Yeah, my main list is weekly. LinkedIn sometimes gets a little bit forgotten. I like to add something new and different, or a different perspective on the LinkedIn newsletter side. So if you go and look on LinkedIn now, it might have been a few weeks, but we've posted some articles there as well.
Yeah. Can I share something about the LinkedIn newsletters that we put out? we've gone back into our archives and we found relevant newsletters that I wrote back in 2016, 2015, 2017, and we've repurposed them.
That's a
Because my
great plan.
attitude is, I don't think people on my LinkedIn maybe knew me back then and were on our newsletter list. And therefore, I don't feel like I'm cheating them by telling them what I may have told another community.
It's great content, isn't it? It's the same with the
Repurpose.
podcasts. I'm like, I need to bring some of those old podcasts back because I think we're on 170 now. And there's some great stuff. I mean, the first 2, 3, I was definitely getting the hang of it. But after that, there's some really good content. Some people listen to the whole back catalogue. I had a conversation with someone the other day and she said, so I've listened to the back catalogue. I've read your book. I've come to your free things. Can we now do one-to-one coaching? I was like, yes. I don't know what else I have to share, but yes.
And that's really interesting, isn't it? Around those, having those assets that people like use. And I think that's what both of you and I do is like, so SOF's podcast, we're on, I think this is, I need to look at it by episode 25 when it goes out live, which is great. And I'm quite happy with that since we only started in December last year. So those are a definite asset. I don't have a book yet. Who knows? That maybe be in the making in the next couple of years. But I think being able to share our assets with people so that they can get a felt sense of us, and then they come to you and go, right, now I want to work with you. So it's just, again, sharing with people. It takes time. It's not these quick wins that you sometimes see being spouted on the social media platforms. Quite frustrating.
Indeed.
Very frustrating, because it gives the impression that, oh, all is good. It's all very easy to do this, and it's not. You are a single mum, aren't you? I know that
I am.
from various Instagram posts and LinkedIn.
Solo mum by choice. So, yes, just in that means I'm not co-parenting, totally doing it on my own. I decided to do that many years ago. Took a long time to actually make it happen, bit of a fertility journey. But I had just reached the point where I was like, I know I want to be a mum. My love life is not working out how I would ideally plan it. I'm not prepared to put the pressure on any relationships that came up, but sit and wait for a man to give me the family and life that I want. Yeah. I optimistically thought it might be quite easy to date afterwards. That hasn't really happened that much, but best decision I ever made.
Wow. I apologize. I didn't realize it had been a life choice. I always played the game in my head of, if I met the right person, I'd have a child, but I never met the right person. But I never had a strong enough yearning pull to go do it on my own. I've got other girlfriends who've done it on their own, and absolutely hats off to you. I think it's it's very altruistic. Is that the right word? Altruistic to do, because I think it's hard.
Yeah, I don't know how altruistic any form of parenting is, to be honest. It's a bit selfish, isn't it, wanting to I don't know, recreate yourself. But yeah, it's hard as well. I think parenting is hard, and I think that's why there's a bit of a divide between parents and non-parents, because you don't realize how hard it is until you're in it, and then you just need your people around you who get how hard it is. And when you're not part of that, and for a long time I wasn't part of that, I just didn't really understand at all.
Yeah, and I don't claim to, and I just go to my friends. If you need me, I'm here. I will do what I can do. Tell me what you need. If it's a vent, is it a download? Is it some babysitting? I'm really happy to do all of that. But I can't offer up the empathy or I really understand you at this point, because I don't. But what's it like being a solo parent and owning your own business?
I think it adds a different layer of challenge logistically, in that you're obviously the only one doing school pickups, drop-offs. So my son is 6.5 at the moment. The only one paying for childcare. It puts the pressure on the business as well, because when it was just me running a business, well, if I didn't make much money, I would just go on less holidays. Now it's like, right, this is about our survival, really. So it definitely puts the pressure on. It restricts my availability as well. So I moved up to Cumbria from Hertfordshire 2.5 years ago now, roughly. And I'd moved out of London to have my child. So I'd moved out of London because I wouldn't have been able to afford to live in London, and I wouldn't have had the support that I needed. So I moved out to near my parents. And then we moved up here a bit randomly, but for a different pace of life, really. And at the time, the world was still very, very virtual in terms of training delivery. But now we're seeing a lot more requests for in-person training. And I've discovered that the train down from Penrith, where I live, down to London, which I was like, amazing, we're on the line, it's going to be so easy to pop down all the time. It's the Pendolino train, and it tilts and it makes me sick every single time. So that is not fun to take that down to London and then deliver a workshop where you're all shiny whilst you're not, you're a little bit green or super pale, trying not to be sick.
Nauseous.
Yeah, exactly. So it hasn't, and I prioritize him, I prioritize being there for him. So I basically had to design a business that works around me. And I've done that very well, but it's meant turning down quite a lot of things. I've got associates who will deliver in London sometimes for me, which is great. Sometimes people just want me, but I'm like, it's a challenge to do. And as a solo parent, I can't just pass my child to someone else and say, right, I'm heading down to London. I have to ask someone a favour. And unfortunately, my child was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the end of 2023. And now it's a very big favour to take on responsibility for a child with a life-threatening disease that needs constant management. Now, for me, that's all manageable. We've got our flow now, it's fine. But to ask my 70-year-old parents to do that, we end up texting at 2 or 3 in the morning when his alarms are going off. So I've now made the conscious choice to really prioritize him. And I love my business, but I'm going to stop comparing myself to the ones that are making loads of money and scaling and getting huge, because that's just not where I'm at the moment. And I don't actually know if it's ever going to be where I'm at.
And it's interesting, like you talk about, there are choices to be made, like, and those choices based on not just yourself. And it's like what's right for your son, what's right for the business, what's right for you as well. Because you mentioned at the beginning of this is, you know, you've experienced a burnout before. So, you know, I'm guessing also being consciously aware, and I know this is what a lot of your business is about, is like, yeah, how am I doing? So, but is it also checking in with ourselves as well? And this is true for everybody. The work that am I doing, is it still, does it bring me joy? Does it make me happy? I think that's a good question to sometimes pause and ask ourselves.
I think I ask myself that regularly. But then I also have to remind myself that there are elements of my job that do not bring me joy. But I can't opt out of everything that doesn't bring me joy. And it is tempting to think that you can design your life to the point where you don't do any of the hard stuff, and then something hard comes along and you're like, oh, I actually do have to do this. Sometimes I think when you're running a business as a solo entrepreneur, and I have a team of freelancers that help me with stuff, and I have Karen, who's my right hand woman, being my VA, which is great. But ultimately the business is an extension of me. And I often find, actually, now I'm having therapy, and I know you have therapy as well. And there's things that I thought I'd sorted in myself and I'd coached myself through. And actually I have, but I've just transferred them over to the business and they're playing out there instead, which is really interesting. I think one of your previous guests talked about that a bit as well.
Yes. James Gardner absolutely spoke about that. Like, it was a great episode if you've not found it, team, but it's about he said, and there's research on this, there's like papers written on it, that your business is a direct reflection of you as a person, the psychosis, psychology, the mannerisms, the behaviors. And literally my jaw was dropping as he was sharing this, Carla, and I was like, because I'd never heard it, and I was like, fuck, yeah, so true. Like, oh man alive, I have a good avoidance strategy, and I thought by bringing people into the business they would pick up some of the challenges that I would find I have. I've now realized I still have to bloody manage people and keep on top of things, and I can't just go, just because you've got this in your title you're going to do it. I still need to just be, I think it's probably being called a leader, there to support and help, and nudge and ask questions, not micromanage, but show willing. But yeah, what Are there any particular choices that you've made by being a solo parent versus the business that you think it would be helpful for others to know about, things that have helped you in what you're doing today?
I think asking for help when you need it is important, like having a support crew, whatever that looks like. And I am not someone who enjoys asking for help at all, but I have realized I really do need to ask for help quite a lot. I also think like being realistic about you can't necessarily do it all to the level that you would want to do. So I don't try and do I don't take my son to every single activity, for example. I pick a few so that I can combine some evenings leaving work at 3:30 and some evenings leaving him till 5 in after school club. So it's that balance really. But for me, it's been making the choice to stop comparing myself to others and other people's businesses, because it's so hard. I find myself doing it a lot. If I spend too much time on LinkedIn, I'm suddenly like, why have I not done a TEDx? And I'm like, I don't want to do a TEDx. I've got perimenopause brain. I would never be able to remember whatever it was I was supposed to memorize.
You'd have it written up your arm, like your keynotes, like, and the...
Yeah. So that's now off the list. But at some point that will have been on my list. But now it's like, no, that doesn't help. That's not going to help particularly build my business. It's not essential. So I guess it's, for me, I do spend a little bit too much time on LinkedIn, but it's reining in that voice in my head that says you should be doing more. You need to be fulfilling your potential. The business needs to be fulfilling its potential. That's a thing I'm working through with my coach, with my therapist, in terms of actually it's okay. And I really enjoy having a simple life. Like in my head, I'm picturing retirement and going, so I could read books, go on walks and garden all day. That sounds amazing. And then I think, I don't recognize myself. I used to be so ambitious and driven and want to do all the things and conquer the world. But I think it's redefining success. So I spend a lot of time thinking about, what does success mean to me? And I was listening to one of your other recent episodes on that. It was really interesting.
And I think maybe this is why I'm having all these conversations with all of you lovely lot, is working out what does bring me joy, what is success. I mean, I literally sat in a therapy session the other week. I'm glad we can just talk about it like this, and literally went, but what's the point? What's the meaning of all of this? And my therapist just looked at me and went, Kirsty, that is the big question that is often the one that no one can ever answer. And I went, is it? I mean, I'm so naive. And he went, yeah, that's like the biggest question that you can ask yourself. Like, what's the point? Why are we here? Why? And I sometimes struggle with it with SOF, because I can absolutely resonate with what you've been saying. Like, oh, it should be bigger. I shouldn't be just doing this on my own. I should have a business partner. There should be a team of 30, 40 people, like some of my peers have, who I started out my career with. Like, they've grown and scaled these big businesses, and some of them are in learning and development. And I'm like, oh, but I've not done that. And then part of me goes, oh. And then another part goes, well, you've chosen not to. Like, you don't want to do that. And I'm like, oh yeah, forget that bit. But then I'm like, but am I not fulfilling potential?
Yes, we had a whole therapy session on that the other day, fulfilling potential. It's really interesting, isn't it? And I was making decisions about, I have to close something down in my business that I hoped would work and doesn't work. And it's been quite a hard decision for many reasons, but mainly that idea of, well, it had so much potential, but it's not fulfilling it. And a failure, right? I did it. It hasn't worked. And for some reason, I haven't been able to just brush that off. It's felt quite personal. And it's like, okay, I used to overinvest, I think, like I said, in my old job. And now I try so hard not to overinvest emotionally in my business, but it's hard. And for me, that often shows up as scarcity as well. You know, you have those times when it goes quiet, you can't see what's happening with the pipeline, or you get a few disappointing decisions in a row. And even though you know, I'm not going to end up on the streets of Cumbria, it's fine. It puts me a bit into panic mode.
Oh, my love, I am so there. So right now, Carla and I are recording this in the end of July 2024. And I just keep saying to people, they go, how's life? How's business? And I'm like, weird. It's weird times right now because people are asking for conversations. You then write the proposal. It then just disappears into a dark hole. And then you follow up and you get maybe a comment, and then you follow up again and then you hear nothing. And a guy in Australia, Marcus Crowe, who's an earlier guest, he was just like, it's a grind. It's a really hard year. And that's in Australia. So his business is Asia. And I'm like, so it's not just us in the UK. Well, me. Don't know how it's feeling for you, but it's a bit rubbish.
Yeah, I really had that last year. So the year before, we'd had a fantastic year, and you forget that business is not linear. And so you're like, we are just going to keep growing from here. And so I invested in learning and the learning designer to make sure that I knew everything we were delivering was as good as it possibly could be. I invested in a new website. I invested in a partnership with someone in South America, all these different things, trademarking, because we were ready to scale. This was it. We were going to really go from there. And then we shrank in income. And the same had happened to me a few years earlier in terms of my B2C, my individual facing business. We'd had a great launch, and all I needed to do was put more money into Facebook ads. And then the Facebook ads completely tanked for everyone in the world at the same time. Wow. And never really truly came up again. And I went from going, yes, this is all possible, to and for me, it's the lack of progress. I really need to be making progress. And I read somewhere that taking a step back in terms of progress has a much bigger hit for us than the positive hit we get when we make progress. It feels really disappointing. And I feel like it's the same. I see the same when I'm managing my son's diabetes. It's like, yeah, we've got this under control. And then something happens. It's like, I've just taken a great big step back. And I find that really hard. But now I'm learning. It's all, I don't know if it's cyclical, but it's definitely a roller coaster.
But also, I reckon if you and I knew each other really well, and you said that to me, and I knew you 10 years ago as you were starting out, and I'd be like, oh, hold on, Carla, though, like what you were doing then and all these things that you've achieved and where you are now, I'd probably be going, is that not progress? And you would probably be saying exactly the same thing to me. But it's like this immediacy of right now. Things just, like, I agree about the shrinking of turnover. Turnover shrunk. Things that I thought were going to take off haven't. Things that I thought were going to come through just are sort of slow to come forwards. And then I'm like, have I not done something? Am I meant to have done more? It's weird. Now, interestingly, if you're listening, you may have picked up that Carla and I like using the language of B2C or corporates or solo. So both of us have, I think, which is quite interesting and unusual. You are the only other person I know who does this. I hope some others now come forward that run two business models under the umbrella of one business. So B2C and B2B. Let's just talk acronyms. What B2C means business to consumer. What does that mean for you? Like, just so I don't talk loads.
So for me, that means I am marketing to individuals in the context of individuals. So obviously, if you're having a sales conversation with a company, you're having a sales conversation with an individual, but they're representing the company. So my podcast, for example, is aimed at women leaders. It's all about the challenges that they face. It's not about how do organizations deal with this. My marketing is all about the challenges that women face. So I have open programs where individuals will either fund themselves, which was very unusual. I think I was one of the first people to actually see. At one point, I had 170 women leaders in one of my open programs, and the vast majority had funded themselves. So they were not getting what they wanted from their organization. I was talking about essentially their pain points, their struggles, in a way that made sense to them. And they were like, okay, I need her help. So for me, that's B2C. It's a very impersonal term, isn't it? But for me, it's about the individuals and speaking to women and speaking to their needs rather than the company's needs.
And in your business, what are some of, because I'm B2C as well, what are the offerings that you have that sit in that space?
So at the moment we have Influence and Impact, which is a 3-month leadership development program for women. And we also have my community Women Leading, which is offering ongoing support to women. Previously, we've also done a confidence course.
Nice. So in SOF terminology, you're talking to female leaders, we talk to facilitators and trainers, interestingly, both in-house, but predominantly those who are like us. So we have the gatherings, we have masterclasses, we also have some one-on-one, I do one-on-one coaching, or I call it more mentorship, where people come and want some support. So yeah, that's the offerings we have on a B2C basis. Flourishing Facilitator, I guess, as well, which is the 4-month learning journey. B2B then, that's the other side of both our businesses. What does B2B mean to you?
So to me, that means selling into companies, basically, and delivering work in-house, whether that is coaching, and actually I do that for individuals as well, or we offer a series of workshops and bespoke training courses as well. So we work with women's networks, L&D teams, head of teams. So sometimes we're supporting all the women in the organization with confidence and influence. Sometimes we're working in-house with a team that is a marketing team, for example, that's struggling with internal influencing and the confidence to do that. We will go in and run sessions with them. So that's relatively new. I've only been doing that in the last few years. It started with keynote speaking, really. So people would listen to the podcast and go, can you come in for International Women's Day? Or can you come in and run a session for my team? And I was like, well, I'm not a trainer, so I don't know, but I'll give it a go. I had always called my group programs coaching programs. And it turns out I absolutely love it. And actually you create different change that way, don't you? You can help to shift a culture. So yeah, that's been a real growth area for the business.
Nice. So my question that I often sit with is how to balance the two, because they are quite different ways of operating, aren't they?
They are, and there's often I don't know that I necessarily do it well, to be honest. So our split in the business, about 50% is from corporate work, about 30% from coaching, which is led by the individuals generally, but the companies will pay for it. And then the rest is open programs. In an ideal world, I would probably just focus on one. In an ideal world, it's tricky, isn't it? Because financially, I would love to just focus on the corporate side of things. It is, once you are having conversations, it is easier. You don't have to be on LinkedIn all the time. It's larger chunks of money. However, I have never really mastered being able to turn on the tap more effectively for those B2B leads. For me, I don't have a sales team. My background is not that I am well connected. When I first started doing stuff in-house, I was like, how do I have credibility? Because I come from the charity sector. And I've got over that now. So ideally, I might stop doing the B2C, but actually that's where you're working with the people that choose to work with you, that have identified for themselves that they have these issues and that want that community. So I don't think I would ever really shut that down, but it would be really nice to not be plugging it all the time on LinkedIn. So in answer to your question, I think I take a fairly relaxed view on the corporate side of things. Leads come in. They come in from LinkedIn. They come in from recommendations. They come in from my podcast quite a lot. I have a lot of HR people listen to my podcast and then they go, oh, we could bring you in-house. So I would say I have a steady trickle of leads, but nothing substantial. So I've always said we're one phone call away from that 100K contract. And I've been saying that for 3 years now. The phone call has yet to come in. So I think we could scale if we needed to, but right now I try and go with the flow really on that side of the business.
Can I just say thank you for sharing your percentage splits, because I could to relate to it. So on the corporate side, that definitely represents 80% of our business, and 20% is what I call the collective, which are the open classes and working with other facilitators and trainers. I probably subsidize the collective side with the corporate work because it costs more than it sort of is publicly known to put on some of these events, to host, to manage. Because actually you said something about, Facebook ads. is the cost of just having a team to help you. Because if I said to you, if you close down, say, the membership side of your business, would that then free up some collateral in terms of you might need less additional support or subscriptions and memberships to things to make it all work?
Yes, it would. I was on a walk yesterday thinking, if I closed down the whole B2C side, what would that look like? But then I was like, but then I'd probably stop doing the podcast because there's not much point in that. And then I realized I have no way of turning on the tap for the corporate leads. So I couldn't do that. But the idea felt quite freeing for 5 minutes of not having to have that constant marketing, but also, the costs. So, my business makes good money, but actually the costs, if you've got the software costs, the support costs, all of these different things, if I was just doing coaching, I wouldn't have any of those costs. And I'd probably make roughly the same amount of profit in terms of paying myself in the end. But I had a conversation this morning with someone who'd listened to the podcast, and she said, I felt really alone until I listened to it, and I felt so much better, and now I've listened to all these episodes, and she was so grateful. I was like, wow, actually it makes a difference. And that's, for me, that's what I'm driven by. It's all about impact. I want to make enough money to have a nice life, and I don't really have a pension, so now I'm like, I really should put some money in a pension as I'm about to turn 50. So I'm being more sensible about money, but actually it's always been about making an impact. That was my whole career before in the charity sector, and it's been my whole career now. And the podcast, does it work as a marketing tool? Yes, but that's not the real reason I do it.
And so to your point, play with the idea, like close something down. And so many people who've looked at my P&L who are very corporate go, but you don't make any money on the collective side. I'm like, no, I don't. So why are you doing it? You should stop it. I'm like, but you don't know how much joy it brings me when I work with a group and we're having these conversations virtually or in person. The look on people's faces when they've come to a gathering and they've made connections, they've got what they needed, they walk away nourished and resourced. Like for a gathering, yes, people go, oh, but you charge £99 for the day. I'm like, yes, it's £600 to rent the room. And people go, oh, and I will pay I'll probably get my train fare covered and food and that's it. Just it's crazy. But and so I will always, and so putting out the podcast, like you could argue there's a cost associated with the podcast because of the editing and the branding and then the publishing and the newsletter, Well, why do you do your podcast? I said, well, because I get really great conversations like this one. People are listening to the podcast and saying, thank you. It's really helping me understand this world, this business, some thoughts I hadn't thought before. So I know it's helping. And I know this is probably maybe similar for you as well. It's a big value to be in service to others and to support and help. If I was just about the money, I'd be totally focused on the corporate side. I wouldn't have half the people working for me that work for me. It would feel really different. But even saying this to you right now, I'm like, ew. Like I need the other side. I need the collective.
It's fulfilling,
really interesting, isn't it? Yeah, it is fulfilling. I'm sitting here going, oh, on the whole B2B bit, another conversation, because I've got loads of things that could help and ideas. I think you're doing a lot of it already, probably, in terms of how you're showing up on LinkedIn and the podcast, and it'll come. I promise you it'll come. The more you do it and the more people know about you, as soon as someone moves from one organization to another, that there'll be we need Carla to come in. It starts to happen, but it takes time. It can take 5 years, 6 years, and people suddenly go, oh no, you should be talking to Carla about this, about women in leadership. She's got this one nailed. And the same has happened for SOF. Like I talk to people and I'm like, how did you find us? Like, how did you, like Nando's? Oh, one of our team follow you on Instagram and suggested we have a chat with you. That's what happens. So yeah,
it does. And if I look back, like if I just think originally, I was really happy to just get a keynote talk, and now actually it's half of my business's income. So like you say, I've come a long way. We've both come a long way, and we've still got far to go.
Exactly. And I think we should just give ourselves like a metaphorical pat on the back, because that's the other thing about being a solo and not having a partner necessarily. I was talking to another friend last night, is you don't have someone to bounce off of necessarily, and people go, but you've got friends, you've got family, and you're like, yeah, it's not the same. Like, just even someone to go, well done, doing a bloody good job, lady.
Yeah, I'm trying to train my 6-year-old to high five me.
How do they react to that?
He's getting there. Sometimes he will proudly talk about his mummy running a business. He did say, when I'm grown up, can I come and work in your business, mummy? I was like, I'll be retired by then, Charlie.
You can own it. You're our legacy. I'll pass it on to you. You can carry on running the business. Interesting. Now, we come towards the end of our conversation, which is a shame, but it has to be. Quick fire questions, Carla. Are you ready?
I am.
What advice would you give to someone starting out?
You don't have to have it all clear in your head from the beginning. Your business will evolve. Whatever plan you have in your head, it's never going to work out exactly like that. Your business will evolve and you will evolve. And I think it's about knowing that that's okay, and then setting time aside regularly to reflect and ask those questions you were saying earlier about, am I happy? Does this bring me joy? Where's the potential here? I think I thought it was going to be a lot more linear and a lot more how I had it on my plan. And actually, it's been a huge evolution. I would never have guessed that I would be working in house with organizations, or indeed running groups for women leaders. I just would not have guessed that at all when I first started.
Wonderful.
So it will evolve, you will evolve, and that's okay.
Absolutely. Good advice. Who do you follow in social media land that you think others should too?
So I don't love social media at the moment, so I had to really think about this. And actually, the person that I am loving following at the moment is on Instagram, and she's called Andrea Gibson. I don't know if you've come across her. So she's a poet.
Ooh.
I came across her on Glennon Doyle's We Can Do Hard Things podcast. She's amazing. She's a poet with a terminal illness. And the way she is sharing is incredible. So I love her. I follow her Substack. I pay for her Substack. I don't pay for many Substacks, confession. I don't think many people are paying for Substacks. But she's amazing. So if you want to be reminded what life is about and how we are getting in our own way, go and follow Andrea Gibson on Instagram.
Agree. Good suggestion. What book or podcast do you recommend? You can do yours, obviously.
I could, but that's just a bit cringy, isn't it? If you want to find mine, you can look me up and find it. The book that I would recommend is 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman. It's blowing my mind. I haven't fully come to my conclusions from it, but it's really helping me to temper my expectations about what I can achieve or what I even want to achieve. And it's just beautifully written. I think he's amazing.
Right. I'm going to have to go and buy it literally after this. You are the second guest to recommend it, and someone has been banging on about it to me for a very long time, and I just haven't pulled my finger out. So thank you for that reminder. That's awesome. Final question. Audiobook. How have you... I'm not an audiobook kind of person.
I'm not, but his voice is lovely, and honestly, he kept me going on an 8-hour journey, and I've never actually got very far through the physical book. But the audiobook, I was like, yeah. He reads it himself as if, which obviously you'd expect, but often they read it in a really stilted way, don't they? And you're like, I don't like this. I like a podcast. I don't like an audiobook, but I do like his audiobook.
I've only listened to one audiobook before, and that was Bob Mortimer's something Satsuma Complex, which was hysterical the way he reads, because he's a very funny person. Sorry, non-English people. He's a comedian from the north of Britain. He's awesome. Anyway, thank you. Final question. How have you invested in yourself or your business to support you in moving forward?
I've invested a huge amount in training and coaching. over the years. That was my my biggest thing I couldn't resist, was learning. In recent years, I've invested in a rebrand and in a learning designer that you recommended, to calibrate what we were doing, really, to make sure that if I was selling it into big companies, that it was at the appropriate level. And I invest in a cleaner and childcare as well.
I've just written a list of 20 things that I believe in, and one of them was invest in yourself. Invest in someone to do the things that you don't enjoy or are hard. And I took it out because I felt it was quite a privileged statement. But things like a cleaner, I do invest in, because I'm really rubbish at that. And I think the 3 hours in a week cleaning, I'd rather pay someone else to do that. So I'm glad you said that. But I think the investing in yourself piece, in terms of others to help you, and also, the learning. I've invested a lot in learning. And I think we should as well, in some ways, if we're standing up and asking others to improve themselves and to show up and do things differently. I think we need to be able to say, I have a coach, I've done this piece of learning, I'm keeping myself current. I think it's really important.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Carla, thank you so much for being my guest today. It's been an utter pleasure speaking with you, and good luck in the future, whatever that may bring.
Thank you, and thanks for this series. It accompanies me on my walks in the morning, and I've learned so much from it. So I appreciate being part of it.
Oh, what a lovely conversation with Carla. It never ceases to amaze me how awesome people are. So to solo parent and to create a business and run a business and to be offering ourselves in service, just like Carla is, I think is incredible. I think the decision-making piece is something that all of us will experience or have experienced in deciding what brings us joy, what makes us happy, what needs to stay in the business, what needs to go. And I think some of us, myself included, that's the hardest one. Like, what do I need to let go of? Because there's a real fear that if we let something go, I'm a failure or I won't have any income. But yet most of us also know through experience, we need to let go of certain things to be able to make space for something else to come. And often when you make space for something to come, it's even better than what went before. But, our brains like to play tricks on us. I hope you found today's conversation insightful, useful, especially the bit around the B2B and the B2C. If you like that conversation, though, feel free to give it a like, 5-star it, 4-star it, but give me some feedback as to why. Write a comment, share it with somebody else. Please share. We'd love to get more people to listen. And I just want to say a massive thank you to you for listening, maybe watching if you do this on YouTube. Without you, there's just no point me putting out a podcast. I'll just be talking to myself, which many of you will laugh and go, well, you do that anyway. But thank you so much for being part of the SOF family, SOF collective. If you want more of what we do, come onto the website, www.schooloffacilitation.com. On there, we have got the newsletter. We have the free monthly community pod. If you didn't know about that, we do the free monthly community pod on Zoom. There are open workshops that you could come and join in on. And some of you might be now thinking, actually, I want some of Kirsty time and one-on-one coaching, mentoring. I haven't got a pithy word to say, but hit me up. Have a good one. Enjoy the rest of your day. And I look forward to you joining me on the pink chair again soon.